Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out. And we have the honor of being in the office of Darren Soto, Congressman, who represents the Hispanic community in Central Florida. Darren, like always, we follow you, and we are so enthusiastic about everything you got to say and the leadership you provided for the Hispanic community. So now the big issue is, every time I turn on the TV set and I listen to the news, there's something else going on hour by hour by hour. Let's start talking about the big issue for Hispanics, which is immigration, which is the biggest concern of multiple groups out of the Hispanic community from all the countries except for Puerto Rico. Everybody's afraid. As you may know, we are very active in immigration issues and our nonprofit, and we're getting drowned and I'm getting calls now from all over the country. We've gotten calls like yesterday from California, this morning from Texas. We get calls from Montana, Wyoming. We got a call from somebody in Wyoming asking about immigration issues. So obviously the Hispanic community is scared to death. Everybody's being threatened emotionally. People can't sleep at night, and that's what they tell me. They lose sleep at night. They're afraid to open the door, and they're even afraid to go out into the street, because of their status or their status being questioned. So what's the latest update with TPS in Venezuela, which is a real hot one for right now?
Sure. So first of all, whether we're Puerto Rican and we stand in solidarity with the rest of the Hispanic community, many of whom are immigrant communities, people are rightly scared because President Trump has taken a very aggressive stance on immigration, and equally as important, it's inextricably linked with our economy and another huge issue that folks care deeply about. So what did we see so far? After I had worked for years to help pass TPS for Venezuelans out of the House, support Haitian TPS, and work with the Cuban community and the Nicaraguan community locally, we saw President Biden had approved that, and we had over 600,000 people be approved under this program for Venezuelans whose countries collapsed to come in. Haiti, it's a long time temporary protective status. Their countries collapsed, and then the president had also put in a parole program that included not only Haitians and Venezuelans, but Cubans and Nicaraguans. And so we saw hundreds of thousands of people come in lawfully through those programs, and 3 out of 4 of those diasporas are right here in Florida. We have a huge Venezuelan community, huge Haitian community, and a huge Cuban community, of course, one of our oldest diasporas. And so now all these folks parole, they're on a ticking time clock of 2 years. So since many of them got parole a couple months ago to a year plus ago, they're here for a year or less, and then their authorization is done, and they're here unlawfully otherwise. So they are supposed to leave, right? And then with TPS, one part of the group of Venezuelans in April, that their status will terminate, and then the other in October, and then Haitians as well later on this summer. Obviously, we've written every letter, made every statement, did a bunch of press conferences and talked about it on the House floor, and there's lawsuits pending because there's an argument that it wasn't done right. They just unilaterally, quickly, without findings, terminated these programs, and generally there's findings to create temporary protective status by the State Department and by the Homeland Security Department, and then you have to make findings that it no longer is in the interest, and there's improved conditions back in these countries, which are not there. So there's also a lawsuit coming out of California that is part of this role. But when I talked to small businesses over the last 2 to 3 years, we saw a distinct improvement in the number of employees people can hire because of these programs. Before that, 2020, 2021, 2022, I was hearing from all these small businesses, many Hispanic owned, I can't find employees. I can't get, and it was tough to get people to serve food or be Uber drivers or help out with landscaping and all these other things. And then we saw a year or two later, everybody had employees, and not only were they Americans, but also these folks. And the last thing I'll say is, these are usually family members of U.S. citizens already here in Central Florida. So when you see President Trump terminate TPS and parole, you're going to see U.S. citizens here in Central Florida have their family members brought back to countries where it's very dangerous. So it'll hurt our economy, divide families, and it's going to keep people scared and then they don't want to spend money because they're scared to go out. They're scared to go to the grocery store. They're scared to go to restaurants. They're scared to show up at work. It's going to hurt construction, service industry, and restaurant industry, tourism, and agriculture in particular, all big parts of our economy here in Central Florida, and we're hoping that it doesn't have to end this way.
I see the thing with the TPS and they're not allowing Cubans to come in anymore. Okay, I interpret that Cubans, and I'm not Cuban, I'm Puerto Rican, but if I was Cuban, I'd consider that, and Cubans traditionally are Republicans, and I would say that's the biggest betrayal of the Cuban community, because Cubans have always supported the Republican Party for the most part. They've always been identified with the Republican Party. And here Trump is shutting them out after everything they've done with the Republican Party, from Republican Party loyalty point of view, and also just because Cubans have contributed so much to the economy of the United States and what they've done here, particularly in Florida and New York. So I see that as a major betrayal by the White House to close the door on Cubans. I mean,
Sure.
They've always been supportive of the United States as a whole, and they've always traditionally been Republicans.
Sure. We know Puerto Ricans trend more Democratic,
Right.
Cubans trend more Republican, although there are, of course, many people who vote the other way in both those groups.
Yeah, but I think it's going to turn around now. I think a lot of Cubans are going to have a lot of second thoughts about going Republican.
So I could tell you this. President Trump on the campaign trail wasn't shy. He was telling everybody he was going to terminate these programs.
Yeah, but you know
so
what?
I wonder, did you just turn a blind eye, or is it that the new folks coming in aren't a priority, right? So I think it's a slap in the face, but we're going to see how people get to make up their own minds about it. But it's going to hurt the South Florida economy too, because Florida, we have an older population that require a lot of services and a lot of immigrant communities over many generations. This is not new. This is since the beginning of our state have relied on a lot of new folks coming in to help out with business around here, to help with the many services from nursing home care and healthcare to running Disney World and making sure people have a good vacation, to growing fruits and vegetables and cattle and all this stuff. So you're going to see it's not just about immigration. It is integrally linked with the economy, and we're going to have a labor shortage, and that's going to mean prices go up. That's going to mean small businesses that go out of business because they can't produce the goods or services they want. And it also, you could even have something worse, stagflation, because you have all these mass firings of folks from the federal government, but they're not going to take these jobs that the immigrants are.
No, they're not.
Are
No, they're not.
by far, most of these are professionals with education degrees, and so you could have mass firings of middle class professionals. You could have immigrants deported, so you lose a lot of workers in a lot of these other industries. So you have prices go up, and you could go into recession. So and so much of this stuff is avoidable. Add in tariffs on top of it, and the chaos that President Trump has brought every day. These things are bad for business. Division, chaos, tariffs, deportations, all bad for business. And you need to look no further than how small businesses are worded around here, and people's 401ks have dropped precipitously. So I'm deeply concerned.
Yeah, I look at Trump and I'm saying, and every time something happens, I look at his approach, and his approach is totally 100% entrepreneurial. It's a businessman's approach, as if he's running his hotel. He'll walk in and say, okay, we don't need these people, fire them. And then 6 months later or 3 months later, he said, well, okay, maybe we need some of them, and then hire them back. That's the way corporate operates. They do mass layoffs. But you can't do that with government, because all of those people are serving other people.
Sure.
And when you fire them, you lose services. You lose services to seniors. You lose services to handicapped people.
Sure.
Which, you don't consider that as an entrepreneur when you're running a hotel.
Well, we're talking about 2,300 people fired from the VA, including
And they're
several
all
dozen.
veterans. Most of them were veterans.
Many of them are veterans, and they're serving veterans. We see dozens of Social Security offices shuttered and people being laid off at the Social Security office. That's going to affect wait times for our seniors and for Social Security. I already got a briefing this week from my district director that wait times are increasing for our cases for local seniors and with Social Security. And then really scary, aviation safety, right? We see a shortage of air traffic controllers and professional aviation safety specialists, and then bringing in issues that have nothing to do with it, like DEI and things like that. When we need resources, that's the issue. We need enough qualified people, and we need the resources and the technology to do these things. And when we're talking about aviation safety, that is our bread and butter here. 40% of all tourists come to Central Florida through flying, and it's a part of our everyday life. Every Central Floridian that I talk to loves how we live close to the airport and we can fly anywhere in the world. So there are some, it's not just that these are mass firings, we're going to feel it directly here. And then a lot of them weren't even done right. When you do mass firings, you have to do a reduction force notice to states because their unemployment rolls are going to rise, and that causes benefits. And a lot of these folks, it had to be a firing for cause, and they did a form letter for tens of thousands of people. So it wasn't specific to that person. And yes, many of them are veterans. And now there's attempts at FEMA and at the post office. So obviously we're deeply concerned about.
There's a shortage at the post. I go to the post office twice a week. Let me tell you something. The lines are extraordinarily long here in Central Florida.
Sure.
Because I've gone to 2 post offices. Same thing. They got 20, 25 people waiting online. You got to wait 40 minutes to get to the window.
And people have to remember, so yes, we have email, yes, we have Amazon, UPS, and that deals with a lot of commerce, but for most people getting their medications, for most rural small businesses, for most e-businesses where you're sending out your goods online that you make at home, it's all U.S. Postal Service. And they're the ones who make a lot of these small businesses, both in suburban and rural areas, more competitive. A lot of seniors rely directly on the post office for medication, and then vote by mail, all these different things. And so what is going to hurt is the most rural areas and our seniors and the small businesses that rely on the U.S. Postal Service that aren't going to be ordering things from Amazon or UPS, which do great work, by the way, as does FedEx and all these other groups. We have their main centers. But they'll even tell you, a lot of the last mile stuff, they still rely on the U.S. Postal Service to get that box the last mile. UPS even does the Sunday delivery for Amazon, as an example.
Yeah. Well, we use the post office all the time, every week, and a couple of times a week, and we concentrate. We send out thousands of emails, but we still need the post office.
I want to talk big picture for a second, if that's okay. So,
Sure.
Why are these mass firings happening? It's a distraction because
Let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
What Elon Musk?
Yes, we're getting right into
All
that.
right, because
Yeah.
he's the guy
So-
who is the guy behind not behind it, but he's the face for it.
There is a record proposed cut to Medicaid, a record proposed cut to SNAP, all so that they can continue the tax cuts for the very rich, which we can't even afford anymore anyway. Ever since 2018, the deficit has doubled, and we've had the national debt rise up. If you fired a quarter of all federal employees, it would still only reduce the debt by the budget by 1%. So this is the small money. The big money is these billionaire tax cuts, and the richest man in the world is in the White House literally on a daily basis. So we could have kids go hungry, we could have kids lose kid care, we could have seniors lose nursing home care through Medicaid and SNAP, we could have farmers lose big contracts to help out our local food banks and our schools, all just so that we could protect tax cuts for billionaires. And it's crazy. And people don't even believe it's happening. And a bill already passed the first vote that outlined $880 billion in Medicaid cuts, $230 billion in SNAP cuts to protect these tax cuts for billionaires. And it is surreal and scary up there right now as we're fighting these things. And we're doing everything we can through town halls, through going to food banks and volunteering and going to nursing homes and talking with our Head Start folks to make sure we're letting everybody know there's a serious jeopardy for these middle class benefits that could go away just to have these tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, and it's got to stop.
Okay, we're going to take a little break right now, okay? So we'll be back in a minute.
Hi, I'm Tony Suarez, an attorney and a professor. I've been very much concerned about what's going on in our nation on the issue of immigration, and particularly here in Florida, where we have laws which have now increased the penalties for persons who are undocumented in this nation, a misdemeanor into a felony. So we are asking all those persons who find themselves that they're still adjusting their status, that are working on getting the immigration status, to seek an identification card. But that lawyer, that card, that identification card that comes from a lawyer, but required by law that the officers stop asking questions of the person they've detained. The result of that asking the questions is the police officers will be denied the opportunity for that person who's being stopped from implicating themselves further by admitting anything that may include the fact that they are an undocumented alien. In that light, we are launching and advising persons who may find themselves that do not have current documents enough when stopped by the police to seek from their lawyers, their legal representatives, the fact and representation that they are represented, and all questions should cease at that moment.
Hey, welcome back, and we're here with Congressman Darren Soto, and we're discussing the chaos that's coming to America right now with all of these different demands and executive orders coming out of the White House. With Elon Musk, he's probably one of the most controversial figures that came out of nowhere. I mean, yeah, granted he's the richest guy on the planet or whatever, but nobody knew that really. Now all of a sudden he's getting more publicity than or as much as Trump does. Give me a personal feeling, if you can, if you're allowed to, on his position in the White House.
So his position is he's the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, otherwise known as Doge, which really, even the name started from a meme coin, which I won't go all into. It's an internet fad that we won't go into. But the whole thing started almost like a joke, and even the name, and then he's tried to apply principles that may have worked in the private sector but are unlawful and do not work in the public sector, and has been disastrous. Look, I'll tell you, on one hand, I appreciate what he's done with SpaceX. We work with SpaceX very closely. I passed a bill last year to help the Launch Communications Act, to help SpaceX, Blue Origin, ULA, NASA with a bandwidth to communicate with rockets. I appreciate what Tesla's done over the years with helping with electric cars. That's very important. Even Starlink, which is launched from the Cape to help with satellite internet. I work with all these companies. So I want to separate the fact that these are companies that are doing innovative things from what's happening in the government, because the government is not a business. It is the most powerful government in a democracy in the most powerful nation in the history of the world. And so certain things that you're allowed to do in the private sector, you're not allowed to do in the public sector, and you alluded to them. You can't just fire a bunch of folks at will, as if they're at will employees. They have collective bargaining agreements, and when you fire by the federal government, you have to give certain notices. Even small private businesses sometimes have to give notices if it's a mass firing, because it affects unemployment and all these things. And the other thing is that he's personally conflicted, because why are all these cuts happening? All these mass firings. Why is it that we see attempted cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, and Social Security offices closing, and veterans benefits potentially being slashed to keep tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans? He happens to be one of those. So is the president, right? And so people are seeing it. Obviously, no one elected him, right? People elected President Trump, and President Trump does not appear at times to be running this part of it. He's deferring to the unelected wealthiest man in the world, and that is something that shocks a lot of people, because I don't think in October, September, November, as the campaigns were going on and we were talking about costs, people thought costs were going to go down, because that's what the president campaigned on. And we've seen instead costs go up. We've seen that chaos is hurting jobs in the market. Things have been unstable economically, and so all this is shocking people each day. It's one thing to see the drama they were used to from the first time President Trump was in office, other than the pandemic, where I believe his response was so bad that he got kicked out of office. They are shocked that it's affecting their jobs, their small businesses, the price of groceries and other things. And that is the biggest thing of why people voted for him. And so he's got to tread carefully on this. This is the biggest issue. It's still about the economy, and the economy is going in the wrong direction by all indicators right now.
When he was elected in his campaign, he was his big push on the immigration concept, to sell the immigration side, was always, I'm going to get rid of the gangs, I'm going to get rid of the murderers, I'm going to get rid of all of these people. And then once he got elected, I saw Tom Homan.
Yep, Tom Homan, the border czar.
Yeah, well then I saw him maybe last month go on and say, yeah, we're going to pick up those guys, but we're going to pick up everybody else because they're breaking the law too. They're criminals. He said that they were criminals. And that, I was stunned, because that was a complete turnaround from what we were sold on the campaign and what many people voted for him. They supported his immigration policy because the whole image of that immigration policy was we're going to get rid of criminals. Who doesn't want that?
And in fact, that is the law. You can get rid of criminals who are immigrants who are arrested, and that is still the law, and that is what it should be. But we have to be a little more careful, both in the name of justice and in the name of the economy, with a lot of these scenarios where, for instance, if someone comes in unlawfully and marries a U.S. citizen, that person can never adjust their status. That shocks a lot of people, right? This is a wife or husband of an American citizen. President Biden had tried to adjust that, and then they bounced it out of court. But that's something that would surprise a lot of people. You have a lot of folks like the Dreamers who have a lot of sympathy because they came here through no fault of their own as little kids. The 3-year-old doesn't decide to go across the border. It's the parents who take them, right? And then you have longtime people who've been here 10, 20 years. Even if they don't get citizenship, if they're helping in agriculture for 20, 30 years, I think a lot of people get it might be fair for them to get a residency at the very least. And so I'm open to all these things. And I was just at some of our local farms yesterday. They struggle to find workers, and the farm work visa program is not easy for folks. Unless you're one of the big guys around here, you struggle and basically rely on family members and folks here and there. But agriculture is one of our biggest industries, and this is going to hurt them big time.
I was told that they're limiting the amount of time, or they're trying to limit the time for residency. Okay, and I have a guy that I met, and I think he came from Guatemala or Honduras. He's been here for 24 years. Okay, he's not a citizen. He has a resident card. He has 5 kids that are U.S. citizens. His wife was a U.S. citizen. He works for a major hotel chain as a manager. And now all of a sudden he's afraid that he's going to get deported. He's frightened that he's going to get deported.
I have a great piece of advice for your friend. He should be applying for citizenship.
Yeah.
They, under existing law, can't just take away a green card. And now there's a big fight over that because they're going to attempt to do that based upon if people made false oaths or promises. We'll see how that works through the courts. But a lot of people like this, he didn't make a false oath or promise. He's just a green card holder who sees that right now that feels paper thin as far as its protection.
It does.
But he should be applying for citizenship. I will say one thing, though, in our office, we're still seeing USCIS move, right? We're still seeing people get their visas. We're still seeing people get work permits. So even as all this craziness is going on and people are getting deported, for people who can adjust status legally for a work visa or for a work permit or that is the one positive thing. So DACA is now back open. And this just happened this past week. Okay. It had been shut down for years because of court cases, but they literally are going to start accepting new applications right now. And it'll be interesting to see what the Trump administration does because that was closed for a bunch of years.
When you say new applications, define that, explain it.
Someone who would be eligible because they came here as a little kid and so therefore they're eligible to apply for deferred action. That means they're protected for a 2-year span and they can reapply and get a work permit. It's basically for dreamers, right? Yeah. And they have to have, you can't have a criminal record or anything like that. And you're 18 and so there's some requirements that I encourage people to work with lawyers on and then I often work with local immigrant organizations or lawyers as we're working with constituents. I can't stress enough how many folks we're talking about are family members of existing citizens. As one Puerto Rican to another, we have always had a responsibility since we are citizens already. And my family's been citizens since the Jones Act in 1918 to help out other Hispanic communities. And so I can tell you, wherever I go, Boricua, we're by and large in favor of helping out fellow Hispanics. And we're not a monolithic community, right? There's people who are Puerto Ricans who are married to Peruvians or Cubans or Venezuelans, or they're half and half, right? And so oftentimes you get folks saying, oh, well, why would the Puerto Rican community care? You're already citizens already. But we're in solidarity, and we have a moral responsibility to lead and help. And I know you feel that way and others do. because we've been blessed with this amazing opportunity as American citizens.
All right, so we've talked about all of this chaos that's going on because of the Trump administration's approach to immigration issues and business issues. Let's look at the Democratic side now. Who are the Democrats going to put up for president against Trump?
Gosh, that's a long. First of all, it shouldn't be against Trump because he's termed out. But
yeah, well, it's against the Trump philosophy
now
because
yeah.
that philosophy, they're setting it up so that philosophy continues.
So one, we got a midterm to win first. So let me just start with that. We have the second narrowest U.S. House in history.
Yeah.
There's 220 Republicans, 215 Democrats. When we're all fully, everybody's fully seated. There's a couple people who passed away, unfortunately, and others who've been appointed. And so 3 seats separate the majority from the minority. So there'll be a fierce battle across 218, 220 something seats. And we saw Hakeem Jeffries the other day, our Democratic leader, garner the votes from all but one member to oppose this continuing resolution that is putting a rubber stamp on all this chaos and all these mass firings. So you could see, he knows how to hold our caucus together, and it's going to all be about improving the economy and costs. It's going to be all about protecting our health care and food assistance, about jobs, about stability.
But is there a cohesive message that the Democratic Party is carrying? The flag, what's the banner?
Yes.
Have they decided what the banner is, what the theme is to combat what's going on?
I could tell you the theme at this very moment, but the actual, what happens in the election, that's a year and a half ago. So right now it's that we oppose Republicans taking your health care, food assistance, veteran services, and Social Security to help pay for tax cuts for billionaires. And we're going to continue to fight to protect your health care. We're going to continue to fight to try to steady the economy and lower costs, and we're going to continue to hold President Trump accountable. And that is all we're supposed to be doing right now. But as we get into next year, a lot of things evolve. Healthcare is going to be a big one. Housing, I think, continues to be a big one. We know housing around here is a real challenge because we live in such a popular area, and the economy is going to be a big part of it, right? These tariffs are wreaking havoc on things, and then we have a tax on labor with deportations, a tax on unions, and all these other things. So I think you're going to see things organically evolve. As far as for president in 4 years. So in our Democratic retreat, I will say we had 3 governors speak to us. We had Bashir from Kentucky. We had Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. And then we had the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Shapiro, speak to us. I'm not saying they're the only ones, but they sounded.
You know what happens?
They sounded great.
They always say that these are the ones, and then somebody pops up, and everybody goes, "Wow, we didn't think about that."
Well,
or time changes, as you go forward.
And look, we got some great senators who may be in the fray too, from Senator Murphy from Connecticut to my buddy Ruben Gallego from Arizona, a Spano, right, and a veteran. So you never know, right? But that's for the Democratic electorate to decide. We're not deciding any of that here today. The main thing is we need to help protect Americans from all this chaos and the potential cuts for veteran services, for health care, for food assistance. It's all about making sure we help fight for Central Florida and stand up for everybody around here.
We ran out of time, Darren, and like always, thank you for informing us on all of these things that are of major concern to the Hispanic community in particular. I'm Danny Ramos, and thank you, Darren, Congressman Soto, and we will see you next week.